The church smelled of prairie dust and judgment. Eleanor Wade stood at the altar in a borrowed wedding dress, 2 sizes too large, its yellowed lace hanging like Spanish moss from her thin shoulders. Her trembling hands clutched a bouquet of wilted prairie roses as she counted the floorboards between herself and freedom. 1, 2, 3, 12 boards. 12 pine planks worn smooth by decades of Baptist feet, each one marking the distance between her and that heavy oak door. 3 seconds to cross them if she ran. She'd always been fast, faster than her cousins, faster than the boys who'd chased her through wheat fields in better times. 5 seconds to wrench open that door with its rusty hinges that groaned like her father's conscience should have. 10 seconds before the stunned congregation recovered enough to pursue. But she couldn't run. Not with her father in the third pew, shoulders shaking with the kind of sobs that came from a place deeper than grief, from shame itself. 3 days ago, she'd been darning stockings by the fire when Garrett arrived. She'd heard his voice through the parlor door. Smooth as oil, twice as slick. $20,000, Wade, that's what you owe with interest. Her father's voice, broken. I don't have it. The drought, the cattle. No, but you have something worth that much. A pause, the clink of coins. Eleanor had pressed her ear to the door. Your daughter. 19 is a good age. Old enough to breed, young enough to train. The memory made her stomach turn. She'd fled to her room, but not before hearing her father's strangled agreement. He'd sold her. Like a heifer. Like a piece of land. Clayton Hartwell stood beside her now, and Eleanor forced herself to study him from the corner of her eye. 38 years old, the whisper said, nearly twice her age. He towered over her 5'4" frame by nearly a foot, broad-shouldered in a way that spoke of years breaking horses and mending fences. His face was weathered leather, carved by Colorado wind and something else. Sorrow, perhaps. A thin scar ran from his left temple to his jaw, pale against sun-darkened skin. A war scar, someone had whispered. Gettysburg or Antietam, they weren't sure which. His hands, she noticed, were clean despite the calluses, the nails trimmed neat. A working man who took pride in himself then. Or maybe just a man who'd cleaned up special for his wedding day, for his purchased bride. The congregation of Copper Ridge filled every pew and lined the walls. November 1892, and all 200 souls in town had come to gawk. Eleanor could feel their eyes like insects crawling over her skin. Mrs. Dalton, the mayor's wife, whispered behind her gloved hand to Mrs. Henderson. 19 years old, still a child, really, and Hartwell old enough to be her father. From the men's side, she heard Morrison, Garrett's business partner, chuckle low and mean. Hartwell knows how to pick him, fresh as morning cream. Even Jim Santos, the old veteran who ran the general store, shook his grizzled head. Clayton's a good man, fought brave at Chancellorsville, but that girl's too young. This ain't right. Only Mrs. Porter, 72 and sharp as winter, looked at Eleanor with something close to understanding. She'd been a mail-order bride herself 50 years ago. She knew what it meant to be bartered. Dearly beloved, Reverend Hayes began, his reedy voice struggling to fill the church. We are gathered here today in the sight of God and these witnesses. Eleanor's gaze drifted to the stained glass window behind the altar. St. Paul on the road to Damascus, struck down by divine light. She wondered if God ever struck down men who sold their daughters. Probably not. The Bible was full of such transactions. Through the colored glass, she could see the Rocky Mountains rising like prison walls against the gray November sky. Somewhere beyond them lay California, Oregon, places where the gold rush had rewritten the rules. Places where a 19-year-old girl might disappear and reinvent herself. But she had no money, no skills save reading, writing, and the Latin the sisters had taught her before her mother died. No way to survive alone in a world that devoured solitary women. Do you, Clayton James Hartwell, the Reverend was saying, take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife, to have and to hold, in sickness and in health? Eleanor held her breath. This was the moment she'd discover what kind of man had bought her. Would his voice carry ownership? Command? The casual cruelty she'd heard in Garrett's tone when he'd touched her face 3 days ago, turning it side to side like examining a horse's teeth? I will. The words stopped her cold. Not I do, the traditional response, the expected one. I will. Future tense. a promise of something to come rather than a declaration of the present. The distinction was subtle enough that most of the congregation missed it, but Eleanor heard the difference, felt it resonate in her chest like a struck bell. She looked up at Clayton Hartwell for the first time, really looked at him. Gray eyes met hers, the color of storm clouds over the prairie, deep set beneath heavy brows surrounded by lines that spoke of squinting into too many sunsets. But it wasn't cruelty she saw in those eyes. It was something else entirely. Sadness, certainly. Weariness, and underneath it all, something that might have been regret. "And do you, Eleanor May Wade, take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband?" The church fell silent as a tomb. Every eye turned to her. In the third pew, her father's sob caught in his throat. Thomas Wade, who'd once carried her on his shoulders through wheat fields, who'd taught her to read using the family Bible, who'd slowly dissolved into whiskey and debt after her mother's death. He couldn't even meet her eyes. Garrett sat in the front row like an honored guest, his black suit immaculate, his smile sharp as a skinning knife. He'd counted out the money on their kitchen table after her father signed the papers. $20,000 in neat stacks, minus his finder's fee of $5,000. Eleanor was worth $15,000 apparently. Less than a prize bull, more than good bottomland. "I do." The words came out cracked and small, like stepping on thin ice. "Then by the power vested in me by God in the state of Colorado, I pronounce you man and wife." The pronouncement fell like an executioner's axe. Final. Irrevocable. Clayton turned to her, and Eleanor braced herself for the possessive kiss that would seal her fate. Instead, he offered his arm with the careful formality of a stranger requesting a dance at a church social. She stared at this unknown limb that now had legal claim to her. One heartbeat, 2, 3, 4. Then, with the whole town watching, she placed her hand on his arm so lightly a butterfly would have exerted more pressure. His arm was solid beneath the black wool of his jacket, the muscle earned from years of ranch work. But he didn't grab her hand to hold it in place, didn't tighten his arm to trap her. He simply began walking, slow and steady, letting her set the pace. They walked down the aisle through a tunnel of stairs and whispers. Eleanor kept her eyes fixed on the door. Those 12 boards she'd counted were passing beneath her feet now, but in the wrong direction. Away from freedom, towards something unknown. Outside, the November wind cut through her borrowed dress like accusations. The sky threatened snow, gray and heavy as her heart. Clayton helped her into the wagon, and that's when she felt his hands at her waist for the first time. Large, capable, lifting her as though she weighed nothing. When she flinched, pure instinct, the reaction of prey to predator, he immediately stepped back. "My apologies," he said quietly. His voice was deeper than she'd expected, roughened by tobacco or disuse. Eleanor said nothing. What was there to say? Don't apologize for touching what you've purchased? He walked around to the driver's side, took up the reins with practiced ease. The two horses, matched chestnuts with white blazes down their faces, stood patient in their traces, breath steaming in the cold air. "Name's Clayton," he said as they pulled away from the church, away from the crowd already gossiping on the steps. "Reckon you know that already, but seems proper to introduce myself." Eleanor nodded, unable to trust her voice. "You all right, Miss Wade?" "It's Mrs. Hartwell now." The words tasted like copper pennies, like blood from a bitten tongue. He was quiet for a long moment, navigating the wagon onto the rutted road that led toward the foothills. The mountains loomed closer here, their peaks already white with early snow. Then, so soft she almost missed it over the creak of wheels and leather. "Only if you want it to be." Eleanor's head snapped toward him. "What?" But Clayton kept his eyes on the road ahead, his profile sharp as carved stone against the gray sky. "The house is about an hour out. You'll have your own room, lock on the inside." "I don't understand." "Nothing to understand. You're young, too young. This wasn't your choice. I see that now." "Now?" Anger flickered through her fear. "You didn't know before?" His jaw tightened, a muscle jumping beneath the weathered skin. "Garrett said you were 22, said you were eager to marry, wanting to help your father, said it was a beneficial arrangement for all parties. And you believed him?" "Had no reason not to. Garrett's done business in this county for 10 years. Help me secure loans for cattle, seed, equipment. He paused, hands tightening on the reins. How old are you? True age, 19. She lifted her chin, daring him to comment. Christ! It came out as a sigh that seemed to age him 10 years. 19. You're a child. I'm not a child. The protest came automatic, though she felt very much like one just then. I've been running my father's household since my mother died when I was 13. Running a household and being sold into marriage are different things. They rode in silence for a while, the wagon wheels grinding against the red dirt road. Prairie grass stretched endlessly on either side, brown and bent from early frost. In the distance, Eleanor could see other homesteads, smoke rising from chimneys, cattle clustered around water tanks. Normal families living normal lives, where daughters weren't currency. A red-tailed hawk circled overhead, free to go wherever the wind carried it. Eleanor envied it with a fierceness that surprised her. Your father, Clayton said eventually. How much trouble is he in? Eleanor almost laughed. Such a small word for such complete destruction. $20,000 worth. The ranch is only worth $8,000 on a good day. The drought killed the wheat. Disease took half the cattle. Papa started borrowing from Garrett 3 years ago. The interest, she shrugged. Garrett's creative with his arithmetic, as you said. And your father agreed to, he stopped, jaw working like he was chewing something bitter. To sell me? Yes. The words came out flat as the prairie. The alternative was losing every fee. The land's been in his family for 40 years. It's all he has left of my mother. She's buried there, under the oak tree she planted as a bride. Your mother's passed? 6 years ago, cholera outbreak. Took her and my little brother in the same week. I'm sorry. Eleanor shrugged. Ida, what good were condolences? They didn't resurrect the dead or redeem the living. The road curved around a stand of cottonwoods, and suddenly the Hartwell Ranch spread before them like something out of the picture books her mother used to show her. The house rose 2 stories, built of timber and fitted stone, with real glass windows that caught the dying light like squares of gold. Not the small, thick glass common to homesteads, but large panes that must have cost a fortune to freight from Denver. Smoke curled from 2 stone chimneys. A porch wrapped around 3 sides of the house with actual milled columns, not just rough posts. And there, Eleanor's breath caught roses. Actual, cultivated roses climbing trellises, their late blooms defying the November cold. It's beautiful, she said before she could stop herself. Mary designed it. His voice went distant as the mountains. My late wife. She drew up the plans herself, said if we were going to live at the edge of civilization, we'd do it properly. Eleanor had heard about Mary Hartwell. Died in childbirth 6 years ago, along with the baby. Some said it broke Clayton, turned him into a hermit who only came to town for supplies and church, though he'd stopped the church part after Mary died. Others said he'd buried his heart with her and had no room for anything but work and whiskey. Looking at the roses, Mary's roses, still tended after 6 years, Eleanor thought maybe both stories were true. I'm sorry, she echoed his earlier sympathy. He pulled the wagon up to the front steps. An older man emerged from the barn, his face weathered as old leather, his gait slightly crooked. Mexican or Indian blood, Eleanor thought, though in the dying light she couldn't be sure. Silas, Clayton said, this is Mrs. Hartwell. Silas touched his hat brim, and Eleanor saw that 2 fingers on his left hand were missing. Ma'am, welcome to the Double H. Silas has been with me since the war, Clayton explained. Lost those fingers at Shiloh fighting for the Union, even though Tennessee wanted him in chains. He runs the ranch when I'm not around, which is most of the time. Anything you need, ask him. I don't know what I need. Nobody does at first, Silas said kindly. You'll figure it out. A woman appeared in the doorway, 50-ish, Mexican, with silver threading through her black hair. She wore a clean apron and an expression of carefully neutral sympathy. This is Rosa, Clayton said. She cooks and keeps house. Her husband Miguel works the cattle. Rosa curtsied slightly. Senora, your room is ready. My room, Eleanor thought, not our room. Clayton climbed down, came around to help her from the wagon. This time, Eleanor was ready for his hands at her waist, managed not to flinch, as obviously. He set her down carefully as placing eggs in a basket. Let me show you inside. The front door opened into warmth and lamplight. The main room was large but not ostentatious. Hand-carved furniture that spoke of craftsmanship rather than mere expense. Braided rugs and patterns Eleanor recognized as Navajo. A stone fireplace, tall enough for her to stand in. It smelled of wood smoke and coffee and leather. Undeniably masculine, but not unpleasant. But it was the walls that caught her attention. Books. Shelves and shelves of books, more than she'd seen outside of the traveling library that came through town twice a year. Mary loved to read, Clayton said, following her gaze. Said if we were going to raise children out here, they'd be educated proper. Children who never came, or rather, one who came and died in the same hour. Kitchen's through there, Clayton continued, gesturing to an archway. Pantry's stocked. Rosa cooks breakfast and supper, but you're welcome to the kitchen anytime. Eleanor nodded, feeling small and lost in this strange new space that was supposedly her home now. Your room's upstairs. She followed him up the wide staircase, her hand trailing along the polished banister. Mary would have climbed these stairs, probably running her hand along this same wood. The hallway was lit by oil lamps in brass sconces, turned low, casting dancing shadows that made the house feel alive. He stopped at the second door on the right. This is yours. The room stole what little breath Eleanor had left. A four-poster bed dominated the space, carved from what looked like cherry wood, with a quilt in shades of blue and cream that must have taken months to piece. A washstand with a porcelain pitcher and basin painted with tiny violets. A wardrobe, door standing open to reveal its emptiness, waiting for clothes she didn't have. A small writing bench beneath a window that faced east toward the mountains. And on the inside of the door, as promised, a heavy iron lock that looked new, recently installed. Use it, Clayton said, pointing to the lock. Every night if you want. I won't come up here unless there's a buyer or some such emergency. This entire floor is yours. The whole floor? 4 rooms, this bedroom, a sitting room through that door, a sewing room, Mary's sewing room, and a bathroom at the end of the hall. A bathroom? Eleanor had never lived in a house with indoor plumbing. Even the mayor's house still had an outhouse. Mary insisted. That distant tone again, the voice of a man speaking from very far away. She said if we were going to live in the wilderness, we could at least be civilized about it. Had the fixtures brought from San Francisco. Cost more than some folks' houses. Eleanor walked to the window, looked out at the vast expanse of land rolling toward the mountains, purple dark in the twilight. How much of this is yours? 3,000 acres, more or less, runs from Willow Creek to the mountain pass. Good water rights, decent grass, enough timber for building. 3,000 acres. Her father's ranch was 200, and he couldn't keep it without selling his daughter. Mr. Hartwell. Clayton. The name felt foreign on her tongue, too intimate for strangers. Why did you agree to this? To marry me? He was quiet so long she thought he wouldn't answer. When he did speak, his voice was careful, considered. The house is too big for one man. Too quiet. Garrett made his proposition 6 weeks ago, and I thought maybe it would be good to have someone here again, someone to talk to at dinner, someone to make the house feel alive instead of like a monument to the dead. You didn't know I was 19. No, Garrett said 22, said you were educated, eager to marry, wanting to help your father. Made it sound like you were grateful for the opportunity. Grateful. The word tasted like ashes. I know different now. Saw it in your face at the church. You were counting the floorboards. Eleanor's breath caught. He'd noticed. 12 boards to the door, he continued. You were calculating whether you could make it before someone stopped you. Would you have stopped me? No, Bob. The answer came immediate, certain. But the town would have. And then things would have been worse for you. A runaway bride has no value, no protection. At least as my wife, you have legal standing. Safety. Choices. What choices? Clayton, moving toward the door, paused at the threshold. The choice to lock this door or leave it open. The choice to come down to dinner or take it in your room. The choice to stay or... He paused. The doors are never locked from the outside, Eleanor. You're not a prisoner here. He left before she could respond, pulling the door closed with a quiet click. Eleanor stood in the middle of the room, listening to his footsteps fade down the hallway, down the stairs. Then she crossed to the door and turned the lock, heard it slide home with a sound like finality. She sat on the edge of the bed and stared at her hands, still clutching the bouquet of wilted prairie roses from the ceremony. 19 years old, a married woman, a purchased bride in a house built by a dead woman's dreams. From somewhere below came the sound of a guitar, lonely and soft. Clayton playing, she realized. The melody was unfamiliar, mournful, something that spoke of loss and continuing anyway. She wondered if he'd played for Mary, or if this was how he spoke to her ghost. Eleanor rose, went to the wardrobe. Inside, she found 3 dresses hanging there. Simple but well-made, in browns and blues. Mary's dresses, altered to fit someone smaller. Rose's work, probably. On the floor of the wardrobe sat a pair of boots, barely worn, a dead woman's clothes for a purchased bride. It should have felt macabre, but instead it felt practical. Mary didn't need them anymore, and Eleanor had nothing but the threadbare dress in her carpet bag. She began to undress, struggling with the buttons of the borrowed wedding dress. Tomorrow she would have to learn this house, these people, this life she hadn't chosen. But tonight, a sound from outside made her freeze. Hoofbeats, multiple horses riding hard. Eleanor rushed to the window, peered out into the darkness. Torches bobbed like fireflies, 5, 6 riders approaching fast. At their head, even in the dark, she recognized Garrett's distinctive gray stallion. "Hartwell," Garrett's voice carried clear in the cold night air. "I want to inspect my merchandise. Make sure you haven't damaged the goods." Eleanor's blood turned to ice. She heard the front door open below, heard Clayton's steady footfalls on the porch. "Get off my land, Garrett." Clayton's voice was calm as deep water, but Eleanor heard something underneath, something dangerous. Now, Hartwell, I brokered this deal. I have a right to ensure satisfaction. The girl's father wants to know she's being treated proper. Her father is drunk in the saloon by now, spending what's left of his 30 pieces of silver. 15, Garrett corrected with a laugh that made Eleanor's skin crawl. My finder's fee, remember? Now bring out the girl. Just wanted to make sure she's intact. Eleanor pressed her hand to her mouth, fighting nausea. Through the window, she saw Clayton step off the porch. He was carrying something. In the torchlight, it gleamed. A rifle. "Eleanor is my wife," Clayton said, still in that terribly calm voice. "Not your merchandise. Not anyone's merchandise. And if you're not off my land in the next 30 seconds, I'll put a bullet in you and let the coyotes sort out the rest." "Now, Hartwell." The sound of a rifle being cocked echoed in the night. 25 seconds. Eleanor held her breath. The riders shifted nervously. Garrett's horse danced sideways, sensing the tension. "This isn't over," Garrett finally said. "That girl's daddy owes me more than money. And one way or another, I collect my debts." 20 seconds. Garrett yanked his horse around, spurted hard. The other riders followed, their torches streaming like comets as they galloped away. Eleanor stayed at the window, watching until the lights disappeared into the darkness. Only then did she realize she was shaking. Below, she heard Clayton come back inside, heard him speaking quietly to Silas. Then footsteps on the stairs, slow, heavy. They paused outside her door. "Eleanor?" His voice was gentle. "You all right?" She couldn't answer, couldn't make her voice work. "He's gone. He won't be back tonight. Silas and Miguel will keep watch." Still, she couldn't speak. "I'm sorry you had to hear that. He's not what I thought he was. I'm starting to see that now." A pause. "Then your father didn't just owe him money, did he?" Eleanor found her voice, though it came out cracked. "No." "What else?" "I don't know. Papa won't say. But Garrett has been coming around for 2 years, even before the loans. Always watching me, always. Always what? Touching. Just little things. My hand, my hair. Papa told him to stop once. The next day, our well was poisoned. 20 head of cattle died. Silence stretched between them. the door a barrier and a protection both. "He won't touch you again," Clayton said finally. "You have my word on that." Eleanor pressed her palm against the door, felt the solid wood between them. "Your word. It's all I have to give you right now, but it's good. I keep my promises, Eleanor." She heard him move away, pause. "There's food in the kitchen if you're hungry." Rosa left a plate warming on the stove. "And Eleanor?" "Yes?" "Count the floorboards in this house if you need to. Count every step to every door. But know this, you'll never need to run. Not from me, not from anyone, not anymore." His footsteps faded down the hall. Eleanor stayed pressed against the door, tears sliding silently down her cheeks. Not tears of fear or sadness, but something else. Relief maybe, or hope. Outside, wolves howled in the distance, wild and free. Eleanor envied them less now. She had a locked door, a rifle-bearing protector, and the promise of choices. Tomorrow she would count the floorboards in this house, map every exit, every window, every possible escape route. But tonight, for the first time since her father had sold her, Eleanor Wade Hartwell felt something she'd thought lost forever. Safe. Coffee and bacon drifted up from the kitchen, pulling her from uneasy dreams. The bed's softness still felt foreign after weeks of sleeping on thin straw mattresses. For a moment, she couldn't remember where she was. Then it all came crashing back. The wedding, the counting of boards. Clayton's rifle in the darkness, Garrett's threats. She'd slept in Mary Hartwell's altered dress, too exhausted and frightened to properly undress. Now, in the pale morning light filtering through the curtains, she felt foolish. She was supposed to be a married woman, not a scared child hiding in her clothes. A soft knock at the door made her jump. "Senora?" Rosa's voice gentle. "Breakfast is ready when you are." Eleanor cleared her throat. "Thank you, I'll be down shortly." Footsteps retreated. Eleanor rose, went to the washstand. The water in the pitcher was warm. Someone, Rosa probably, had filled it while she slept. Such small kindness from strangers made her eyes sting. She washed her face, tried to tame her hair into something respectable. The brown dress fit better than she'd expected, though the hem needed taking up. Mary must have been taller. Eleanor wondered what else about her predecessor she'd discover in the coming days. The house was quiet when she finally ventured into the hallway. She'd locked her door behind her out of habit, the key now hanging on a ribbon around her neck, hidden beneath the collar of the dress. The hallway stretched before her, 4 other doors closed and mysterious. Mary's sewing room, the bathroom with fixtures from San Francisco, rooms that were supposedly hers now, though they felt like trespassing. She counted the steps to the staircase, 15, then the stairs themselves, 16, with a landing at the 8th. The banister was smooth maple, worn from years of hands sliding along it. At the bottom, she hesitated. The house opened in 3 directions. The main room with its books and memories, what looked like a study to the left, and voices coming from what must be the kitchen to the right. "She's too young, Clayton." Silas's voice, low but carrying. "Garrett won't let this go." "I know." Clayton's response, tired. "But what's done is done. She's here, she's safe, and she's my responsibility now." "She's your wife. She's a scared 19-year-old girl who was sold like cattle. Being my wife is just paper. Keeping her safe is what matters." Eleanor stepped into the kitchen doorway, making both men look up. Clayton sat at a long wooden table, a coffee cup in hand. He looked like he hadn't slept. The same clothes from yesterday, stubble darkening his jaw, those gray eyes rimmed with exhaustion. "Morning, Mom," he said, rising from his chair, always the gentleman even after a night standing guard. "Good morning." Eleanor's voice came out smaller than intended. "Sit," Rosa commanded from the stove, already filling a plate. "You're too thin. Eat." The table stretched between them like a chasm, 12 feet of polished wood marking the distance neither knew how to cross. The table could have seated 12. They occupied opposite ends like opposing armies. "Did you sleep?" Clayton asked. "Some, did you?" "Some." Rosa set a plate before her, eggs, bacon, biscuits with butter and honey. More food than Eleanor had seen at once in months. Her father had been selling off everything, even chickens, to pay debts. "Thank you," she whispered. De nada, mija. Rosa patted her shoulder gently. Eleanor ate in small bites while Clayton and Silas discussed the day's work. Fences to mend, cattle to move to winter pasture, hay to inventory. Normal ranch business, as if last night's confrontation hadn't happened, as if she weren't sitting at their table like a ghost at a feast. I'll teach you to ride today, Clayton said suddenly, making her look up. I know how to ride. Side saddle? Yes. Not out here. You need to ride properly. Astride, in case I need to run. The words came out sharper than intended. Clayton met her eyes steadily. In case you need to be free. After breakfast, Eleanor followed him to the barn. The structure was newer than the house, built solid against winter storms. Inside, horses shifted in their stalls, breathing steam in the morning cold. The smell of hay and leather and horse wrapped around her, familiar and comforting. This is Buttercup, Clayton said, leading out a golden mare with a white star on her forehead. She was Mary's, gentle as they come but sure-footed on rough ground. Everything here had belonged to another, the horse, the clothes, even the walls seemed to remember their first mistress. Eleanor wondered if she'd ever owned anything that hadn't belonged to a dead woman first. The side saddle is useless out here, Clayton interrupted. You can't run cattle in petticoats. Can't outrun trouble sitting sideways. Rosa has some split skirts that should fit. For now, he pulled down a pair of boy's trousers from a hook. These were for the hand's son, but he outgrew them. They'll do. Eleanor stared at the trousers. She'd never worn pants in her life. It's not proper. Neither is selling your daughter to pay debts, but here we are. The bluntness of it made her flinch. Clayton's expression softened. I'm sorry, that was harsh. But true. Truth and harshness don't need to be partners. He set the trousers on a hay bale. Wear them or don't, your choice. But if you're going to live out here, you need to be able to ride hard and fast. That means riding like you mean it, not like you're having tea with the ladies' auxiliary. He left her in the barn to decide. Eleanor held up the trousers, wool-worn soft with use. Her mother would have been scandalized. But her mother was dead, and her father had sold her, and the ladies in town already whispered about her. She changed in an empty stall, fingers fumbling with unfamiliar buttons. The trousers felt strange, foreign, but also liberating. She could move her legs freely, stride without worrying about skirts tangling. When she emerged, Clayton was adjusting Buttercup's saddle, a regular saddle, not the side saddle instrument of torture she'd learned on. Good choice, was all he said. He showed her how to mount properly, how to grip with her knees, how to hold the reins. His hands were careful when they needed to adjust her position, always asking permission first. May I? Before touching her boot to fix her foot in the stirrup. Is it all right if I? Before adjusting her grip on the reins. This close, she could smell him. Soap and leather and something else, cedar maybe. He was patient, explaining each adjustment, never condescending. When Buttercup shifted and Eleanor tensed, he calmed both horse and rider with the same low voice. She's testing you, he explained. Horses know when you're scared, but they also know when you're brave. Show her which one you choose to be. They started slow, walking around the corral. Clayton rode alongside on his black gelding, a massive horse named Tempest, who looked like he could carry a full-grown bull without noticing. Relax your shoulders, Clayton instructed. You're not fighting the horse. You're partnering with her. Like a dance. I don't know how to dance either. Then you'll learn both together. By noon, Eleanor was trotting confidently, even managed a brief canter that left her breathless but grinning. She'd forgotten what it felt like to smile genuinely, not the performative smile required at church or in town. You're a natural, Clayton said, and she could tell he meant it. My mother rode, Eleanor found herself saying, before she married Papa. Her family had horses in Virginia before the war took everything. The war took a lot from everyone. You fought? 3 years, Tennessee 5th Infantry, then with Sherman. He said it matter of fact, but Eleanor heard weight beneath the words. The scar? His hand went unconsciously to his face. Chickamauga, grape shot from a cannon. Lucky it didn't take my head clean off. Mary must have been terrified when you came home hurt. Clayton's face shuddered. I didn't know Mary then. Met her after, in '68. She was, he stopped, cleared his throat. We should head back. Rosa will have lunch ready. That afternoon, while Clayton worked with Silas on fence repairs, Eleanor explored the house. She'd meant to count floorboards, map exits, but found herself drawn instead to the details of life lived and lost. The study was clearly Clayton's domain. Ledgers, maps, a gun cabinet with 3 rifles and 2 pistols. But there were touches of Mary here too. Curtains in cheerful yellow, a watercolor of wildflowers above the desk, a woman's handwriting in the margins of some ledgers. The main room she explored more thoroughly. The books were eclectic, novels by Dickens and Austen, agricultural manuals, histories of Rome and Greece, even some poetry. Many had inscriptions, "To my darling Mary, Christmas 1869, forever yours, Clayton," or "Happy birthday, my love, may you have stories for all your days." In one, a slim volume of Shakespeare's sonnets, Eleanor found a pressed rose and a note. "Clayton, thank you for the roses. They're almost as beautiful as your attempts at poetry last night. Almost. Yours teasingly, M." Eleanor carefully replaced the rose, feeling like a voyeur into a love she'd never have. She was examining a daguerreotype on the mantel, Clayton and Mary on their wedding day, him young and unscarred, her radiant in white, when she heard horses approaching. Her body reacted before her mind, heart racing, hands trembling. Garrett. He'd come back. But when she peered through the curtain, it wasn't Garrett's gray stallion. 3 women in a proper carriage, driven by an elderly man she recognized as Mr. Campbell from the general store. Rosa appeared, wiping her hands on her apron. "The welcome committee," she said with a tone that suggested it was anything but welcome. "Every new bride gets a visit." Eleanor's stomach dropped. She was still wearing the trousers. "No time to change," Rosa said, reading her panic. "Chin up. You're Mrs. Hartwell now." The knock came like judgment. Eleanor smoothed her hair, tried to calm her breathing, and opened the door. Mrs. Dalton stood at the front, flanked by Mrs. Henderson and, surprisingly, Mrs. Porter. All 3 took in Eleanor's appearance, the trousers, the wind-blown hair, the color in her cheeks from riding. "My word," Mrs. Dalton breathed. Are those men's clothes?" "Split skirts," Eleanor lied smoothly. "For riding, much more practical on a ranch." "I see." Mrs. Dalton's tone suggested she saw entirely too much. "We've come to welcome you to married life, dear. May we come in?" Eleanor stepped aside, having no choice. The women entered like they owned the place, eyes cataloging everything. The fine furniture, the books, the photographs of Mary still prominently displayed. They settled in the sitting room, Eleanor perching uncomfortably on the edge of a chair, while Rosa served tea with barely concealed hostility. "Such a hasty wedding," Mrs. Henderson began. "Why, you barely had time to know each other." "Sometimes the heart knows quickly," Eleanor replied, the lye ash in her mouth. "Indeed." Mrs. Dalton's smile was sharp. "And how fortunate that Mr. Hartwell was able to help with your father's difficulties." Heat rose in Eleanor's cheeks. "My father's business is his own." "Of course, though $20,000 is quite a sum. The whole town's talking about it." "Then the town has too much time on its hands," Mrs. Porter chuckled. "Good for you, girl, Mrs. Dalton shot her a look, then returned to Eleanor. "You must understand, dear, we're only concerned for your welfare. A young girl like you, practically a child, married to a man nearly 20 years your senior, and with his history." "History?" "Well, poor Mary's death was so tragic and so sudden. One day she was healthy, the next—" Mrs. Dalton trailed off suggestively. Eleanor felt her spine stiffen. "What are you implying?" "Nothing, dear, nothing at all. Just that some men are unlucky in love, and you're so young. 19, isn't it? Old enough to marry, but not old enough to know what you've gotten into, perhaps." The front door opened, saving Eleanor from responding. Clayton entered, dusty from work, and the women fell silent. He took in the scene, the vultures circling his young wife, and his expression darkened. "Ladies," he said with minimal courtesy, "to what do we owe the pleasure?" "We've come to welcome your bride, Mrs. Dalton said, though her tone suggested condolences might be more appropriate. "How kind." His tone suggested otherwise. "Though I'm afraid you'll have to cut your visit short." Eleanor and I have business in town. We do? Eleanor asked, then caught his look. Yes, of course, the thing at the bank. The women exchanged glances, gathered themselves to leave. At the door, Mrs. Dalton paused. Do be careful, Mr. Hartwell. Young wives can be so fragile. Clayton's voice went cold as winter stone. My wife is stronger than you think, Mrs. Dalton, and she's under my protection. Full protection. Make sure the town understands that. The threat was subtle but unmistakable. Mrs. Dalton flushed, nodded, and fled to the carriage. When they were gone, Eleanor sagged in relief. There's no business in town. There is now, Clayton said. Get your coat. The ride to town took 40 minutes. Clayton explained as they went. Garrett's been spreading stories. Says the marriage isn't valid because it hasn't been consummated. Says he has a prior claim based on some paper your father supposedly signed. Eleanor's blood chilled. Papa wouldn't. Your father was drunk and desperate. He might have signed anything. They rode in silence for a while, Eleanor fighting nausea at the thought of what her father might have promised. Is it true, she finally asked, about the marriage not being valid? Legally? Gray area. Practically? I'm the one with the rifle and the will to use it. You can't shoot your way out of legal problems. Watch me. Despite everything, Eleanor almost smiled. What's the plan then? We go to the bank, publicly, make it clear you're my wife, under my protection, and anyone who suggests otherwise will answer to me. That's not much of a plan. It's what I've got. Copper Ridge looked different from horseback, wearing trousers, riding beside a man with a gun on his hip and danger in his eyes. People stared openly as they rode down Main Street, Eleanor fighting the urge to count escape routes. The bank sat on the corner, brick and imposing. Garrett Financial Services painted in gold on the window. Clayton dismounted, helped Eleanor down, his hands lingering at her waist longer than necessary, a show for the watching town. Whatever happens, he murmured, stay behind me. I'm not a child. No, but you're 19 and he's a snake. Snakes bite the young first. Inside, the bank was all dark wood and darker intentions. Garrett sat behind his massive desk like a spider in an expensive web. He smiled when they entered, the expression never reaching his eyes. Hartwell, and the lovely Mrs. Hartwell, to what do I owe the pleasure? Clayton pulled out a chair for Eleanor, positioned himself between her and Garrett. We need to discuss the terms of our arrangement. Our arrangement is simple. I facilitated a marriage. You paid for the privilege. You lied. About her age, about her willingness, about everything. Garrett shrugged. Buyer beware. And these supposed prior claims you're spreading around town? Garrett's smile widened. He pulled out a paper from his desk. Thomas Wade signed this 2 years ago. A promise that if he couldn't pay his debts, his daughter would marry me or someone of my choosing. Dated well before your arrangement. Eleanor gasped. Clayton's hand found hers, squeezed warning. Let me see it. Garrett slid the paper across. Clayton read, his face giving nothing away. This is worthless, he finally said. You can't trade people like property. The war settled that. The war was about Negroes, not white girls. Different situation entirely. Not in the eyes of the law. Perhaps, but in the eyes of this town, a father's right to arrange his daughter's marriage is sacred, and I arranged it first. Clayton stood slowly. Here's what's going to happen, Garrett. You're going to burn that paper. You're going to forget any claim you think you have on my wife, and you're going to stay away from her. Or, Clayton leaned across the desk, or I'll kill you. The words dropped into the silence like stones into still water. Garrett's smile faltered. You're threatening me? In my own bank? I'm promising you there's a difference. You can't just, I will. I spent 3 years killing men for worse reasons than protecting my wife. You think I'd hesitate now? Garrett's face flushed. This isn't over. Yes, it is. Clayton straightened, took Eleanor's arm. Come see us again, and they'll find you in a ravine. The sheriff won't look too hard. He owes me from the war. The town won't mourn. Half of them hate you already. And Eleanor will be free. They left Garrett sputtering behind his desk. Outside, Eleanor's legs shook so badly Clayton had to help her mount Buttercup. Would you really kill him? She asked as they rode out of town. Yes. The simple certainty of it should have frightened her. Instead, she felt oddly protected. They were halfway home when they heard horses behind them. Eleanor's heart jumped, but Clayton just sighed. "That'll be Sheriff Williams," he said. "Garrett's called in his marker." Indeed, the sheriff and two deputies caught up quickly. Williams, a thin man with a badge too big for his chest, looked apologetic. "Clayton, I need to ask you some questions about threats made against Mr. Garrett." "Ask away." "Did you threaten to kill him?" "I promise to kill him if he comes near my wife again." "There's a difference." Williams rubbed his face. "Clayton, you can't just—" "Tom." Clayton's use of the sheriff's first name was deliberate. "Remember Chickamauga? Remember who pulled you out of that ditch when the Rebs overran our position?" "That's different." "It's not. A man protects what's his. You'd do the same for Martha." Williams looked at Eleanor, young and frightened on her horse. Something in his expression softened. "Garrett says the marriage might not be legal. The marriage is recorded in the church ledger. Reverend Hayes performed it. The whole town witnessed it. It's legal. He says it hasn't been, that is, what happens between a man and his wife is private, Tom. Even asking about it is insulting." Williams flushed. "You're right. My apologies, Mrs. Hartwell." Eleanor nodded, not trusting her voice. "Just keep the threats to a minimum, Clayton. I can't ignore everything. I'll be as peaceful as Garrett lets me be." Williams sighed again, knowing that was the best he'd get. He tipped his hat to Eleanor and rode off with his deputies. They continued home in silence. As the ranch came into view, Eleanor finally spoke. "This can't go on." "What?" "Garrett, the threats, the town watching us like we're a circus act. Something has to change." Clayton was quiet for a long moment. "What do you suggest?" "I don't know. But I won't live in fear. I won't be fought over like a bone between dogs." "You're not—" "I am, though. To Garrett, to the town, even to you in a way. Everyone sees me as something to be claimed or protected or gossiped about. No one sees me as a person who might have her own thoughts about all this." Clayton pulled Tempest to a stop. "What are your thoughts?" Eleanor met his eyes. "I think I need to learn to shoot." He blinked, surprised. "Shoot? If I'm going to live out here, if Garrett's going to be a threat, I need to be able to protect myself. You won't always be there." "I'll try to be." "That's not good enough. Teach me to shoot, Clayton. Let me at least have that." He studied her for a long moment, this 19-year-old girl in borrowed clothes on a borrowed horse, asking for the power to defend herself. "All right," he said. "Tomorrow, after riding lessons, we'll start with the Winchester." That evening, dinner was quiet. Rosa had made stew, thick with vegetables and tender beef. Eleanor ate mechanically, her mind churning over the day's events. "You did well today," Clayton said suddenly. "In town, with those women, you held your ground." "I felt like running, but you didn't. That's what matters." "Is that what you learned in the war? To stand when you want to run?" "Sometimes. Other times I learned when running was the smarter choice." "And which is this?" Clayton considered. "I don't know yet, but I promise you this. Whatever we do it together. You're not alone in this, Eleanor." The use of her name, soft in the lamplight, made something in her chest tighten. After dinner, Clayton retreated to his study. Eleanor heard the guitar again, that same mournful melody. She found herself drawn to the sound, stood outside the door listening. The music stopped. "You can come in," he called. She entered, embarrassed at being caught. Clayton sat in a leather chair, the guitar across his lap. "Mary loved music," he said, "made me learn so I could play for her. I'm not very good." "You sound good to me." "You're kind." He set the guitar aside. "Do you play anything?" "Piano, a little. My mother taught me before she died. There's a piano in the front room, under a sheet in the corner. I couldn't bear to look at it after." He trailed off. "Would you mind if I played it sometime? It would be good to hear music in this house again." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment. Then Eleanor asked what she'd been wondering all day. "Why did you really marry me, Clayton? Not the story you told, the truth." He was quiet so long she thought he wouldn't answer. When he did, his voice was barely above a whisper. "I was going to kill myself." Eleanor's breath caught. "The night before Garrett came with his proposition. I had the gun loaded, the note written. 6 years of living with ghosts was enough. Then Garrett showed up the next morning, talking about this girl who needed protection, whose father was desperate. I thought, maybe saving someone else might be worth staying alive for. So you saved me to save yourself? Maybe. Or maybe we're saving each other. Or maybe we're both drowning and just haven't sunk yet. Eleanor rose, crossed to him, did something that surprised them both. She took his hand. We're not drowning, she said firmly. We're learning to swim. His hand was warm, calloused, 3 times the size of hers. He squeezed gently, then let go. You should get some rest. Tomorrow, you learn to shoot. It's harder than it looks. Eleanor moved toward the door, paused. Clayton? Yes? Thank you for today, for the protection, for treating me like a person, not property. That's the bare minimum, Eleanor. You deserve more. Maybe, but right now the bare minimum is more than I had yesterday. She left him sitting in the lamplight, the ghost of his dead wife and the weight of his living one both pressing down on his shoulders. In her room, door locked, Eleanor counted the day's victories. She'd ridden astride. She'd stood up to the town gossips. She'd made Clayton promise to teach her to shoot. Small steps, but forward momentum. Outside, she heard horses. Her body tensed, but it was just Silas and Miguel returning from checking the fence lines. Their voices drifted up, speaking Spanish, comfortable and familiar. Eleanor went to the window, looked out at the vast darkness of the prairie. Somewhere out there, Garrett was plotting. Somewhere out there, her father was drinking away his guilt. Somewhere out there, freedom waited. But here, in this house built by a dead woman's dreams and protected by a damaged man's promises, Eleanor was beginning to think she might find something better than freedom. She might find home. The Winchester kicked against Eleanor's shoulder like an angry mule, sending her stumbling backward. Clayton caught her before she fell, his hand steadying her waist. Too much gun for you? He asked, not unkindly. No. Eleanor set her jaw, raised the rifle again. Just wasn't ready. They'd been at it for an hour, setting up bottles on fence posts 50 yards out. Eleanor had yet to hit one, but her determination hadn't wavered. It was the 3rd day of shooting lessons, and her shoulder was already purple with bruising she hid beneath high collars. Breathe, Clayton instructed, moving behind her to adjust her stance. The gun's not your enemy. Work with it, not against it. His chest pressed against her back as he guided her arms. Eleanor tried to ignore how solid he felt, how his warmth cut through the November chill. See that bottle? The green one? Yes. Don't think about hitting it. Think about reaching out and touching it with the bullet. Like extending your finger across the distance. The world narrowed to the green bottle, her finger on the trigger, the held breath before thunder. The green bottle exploded. I hit it. She spun around, grinning, and found herself inches from Clayton's face. They both froze. This close, she could see flecks of gold in his gray eyes, could smell the tobacco and leather scent of him. His gaze dropped to her lips for just a moment before he stepped back. Good shot, he said, voice rougher than usual. Try again. Eleanor turned back to the targets, face burning. She'd been married 2 weeks, and this was the closest they'd been besides his helping her mount and dismount Buttercup. He still kept to his side of the house, she to hers. They ate meals together, talked about ranch business and books, but there wasn't always space between them. Safe space. Lonely space. She hit 2 more bottles before they heard the wagon approaching. Clayton tensed, hand moving to the pistol on his hip, then relaxed. That's Doc Morrison's rig. Dr. Morrison was one of the few people in Copper Ridge who didn't treat Eleanor like scandal incarnate. He'd delivered her and her brother, had tried to save her mother from cholera. Now nearing 70, he still made house calls throughout the county. The wagon pulled up, and the doctor climbed down, moving slower than Eleanor remembered. Clayton, Mrs. Hartwell. He tipped his hat to Eleanor, one of the few who used her married name without irony. I'm afraid I bring troubling news. What is it? Clayton asked. It's Thomas Wade, Eleanor's father. He's very ill. Eleanor's rifle slipped from her hands. What kind of ill? He's been drinking heavily since the wedding. Yesterday he collapsed in the saloon. He's asking for you, Eleanor. Asking for me? Bitterness crept into her voice. He sold me and drank the profits. Now he wants absolution? Dr. Morrison's weathered face was sympathetic. He's dying, child. The drink has destroyed his liver. I'd say he has days, maybe less. Eleanor felt the ground shift beneath her feet. Despite everything, he was still her father. The man who'd taught her to read, who'd carried her on his shoulders through summer fields, who'd slowly dissolved into someone she didn't recognize after her mother's death. I'll get the wagon, Clayton said. I'm coming with you, Eleanor said. Eleanor, he's my father. Whatever he did, he's still my father. The ride to town felt endless. Eleanor sat rigid beside Clayton, hands folded in her lap. She changed into one of Mary's better dresses, wanting to look respectable, wanting the armor of propriety. You don't have to forgive him, Clayton said quietly as they neared town. Seeing him doesn't mean forgiving him. I know. Do you? Eleanor looked at him. Did you forgive the men you killed in the war? That was different. Was it? They were following orders, same as you. They probably had families, daughters maybe. Did that make it easier or harder? Clayton was quiet for a long moment. Harder. Always harder when you remember they're human. My father's human, weak and broken and human. They pulled up at Dr. Morrison's house, where he'd been keeping Thomas since his collapse. The doctor's wife, a stern woman who'd never approved of Eleanor's education, led them to a back room. The man in the bed looked nothing like Eleanor's father. Thomas Wade had been tall, strong from farm work, with laughing eyes and a quick smile. This was a skeleton, wrapped in yellow skin, eyes sunken, breath rattling. Eleanor? His voice was barely a whisper. My little bird? The childhood nickname broke something in her chest. I'm here, Papa. I'm sorry, so sorry. I thought I was saving you. Saving me? Thomas tried to sit up, fell back coughing. Blood specked his lips. Garrett, he said if I didn't pay, he'd take you anyway. Said he had ways, legal ways. Said at least with Hartwell, you'd be protected. Clayton stepped forward. What legal ways? Thomas's eyes, clouded with pain and medication, struggled to focus. The contract, from when Eleanor was 15. I was drunk, desperate. Garrett said he'd loan me money if I promised Eleanor would marry him when she turned 18. Eleanor gasped. You promised me to him when I was 15? I was drunk. Your mother had just died. The farm was failing. He said it was just insurance, that I'd never have to honor it. But then the debts grew and he started coming around, watching you. So you sold me to Clayton instead? He offered more, enough to pay Garrett and have some left over. I thought Hartwell was a good man, better than Garrett at least. Clayton's jaw was tight. Why didn't you tell me about the prior contract? Garrett said if I did, he'd call it in immediately. At least this way, Eleanor had a chance at a decent life. A chance? Eleanor's voice rose. You gambled my life on a chance? I'm sorry, little bird, I'm so sorry. Thomas reached out a skeletal hand. Eleanor stared at it, remembering when those hands had taught her to milk cows, to plant seeds, to hold a pencil, then slowly she took it. I don't forgive you, she said quietly. Maybe someday, but not today. I don't deserve forgiveness. Tears leaked from his eyes. Just be happy, Eleanor. Whatever that means now, be happy. He squeezed her hand weakly, then his eyes moved to Clayton. You'll protect her? From Garrett? With my life, Clayton said simply. Good, good. Thomas closed his eyes. I think I'll sleep now. Eleanor held his hand as his breathing grew shallower. An hour later, with the sun setting red through the window, Thomas Wade died. Eleanor didn't cry. She sat holding her dead father's hand, feeling hollow as a reed. We'll bury him beside your mother, Clayton said softly. If that's what you want. It's what she would want. Dr. Morrison entered, checked for a pulse, gently closed Thomas's eyes. I'm sorry, Eleanor. He was sorry too. Doesn't change anything, but he was sorry for me. They held the funeral 2 days later. Only a handful of people came. Dr. Morrison and his disapproving wife, Sheriff Williams out of duty, Mrs. Porter out of kindness, and surprisingly, Silas and Rosa. Garrett arrived as they were lowering the coffin, dressed in an expensive black suit like he was attending a celebration. "My condolences, Mrs. Hartwell," he said, emphasis mocking on her married name. "Such a tragic loss. First your mother, your brother, now your father. You seem to be quite unlucky with family." Clayton stepped between them. "Not here, Garrett. I'm simply offering condolences. Though I must say, with Thomas gone, certain contracts he signed become very interesting. You see, they transfer to his heir. His heir is his daughter, who is my wife." "Ah, but is she? Really? The whole town knows you sleep in separate rooms, that you've never touched her. Some might call that fraud." Eleanor found her voice. "Some might call you a vulture feeding on the dead." Garrett's smile was oil slick. "Such spirit. I can see why Clayton bought you. Though I wonder if he knows what he really purchased." "What's that supposed to mean?" "Ask him about Mary. Ask him what really happened the night she died." Clayton went very still. "Leave now." "Or what? You'll shoot me at a funeral?" "I think not." Garrett tipped his hat to Eleanor. "We'll speak again soon, my dear, very soon." He walked away, leaving silence in his wake. The few mourners dispersed quickly, sensing danger. That night, Eleanor couldn't settle. She paced her room, Garrett's words echoing. Finally, near midnight, she went downstairs. Clayton sat in his study, a glass of whiskey untouched beside him, staring at a photograph of Mary. "What really happened?" Eleanor asked from the doorway. He didn't pretend not to understand. "She killed herself." Eleanor's breath caught. "She took laudanum, a whole bottle, while I was in town." His voice was flat, emotionless. "She was pregnant, 7 months. The baby died with her." "Why?" Clayton finally looked at her, and his eyes were hollow as graves. "Because of me. Because I brought her here, to this isolation. Because I was gone too much, working the ranch. Because the war left me broken in ways she couldn't fix." "That's not—" She left a note. He pulled out a worn piece of paper, handed it to Eleanor. "Clayton, hon, I'm sorry. I can't do this anymore. The loneliness, the silence, your nightmares that wake me. You're here, but not here. You died in that war and just forgot to stop breathing. I'm taking our child with me. Better no life than this half-life." Mary Eleanor's hands shook. "This isn't your fault." "Isn't it? I chose to bring her here. I chose to shut her out when the memories got too dark. And she chose to leave. That was her choice, not yours." "Choice." Clayton laughed bitterly. "Funny thing about choices, Mary had them, you don't." "I have more than I did 2 weeks ago." "Do you? You're 19, married to a man who can't even save his wife from herself, threatened by a predator who has legal claims on you. What choices do you really have?" Eleanor crossed the room, took the whiskey glass from beside him, and drank it in one burning swallow. Clayton's eyes widened. "I choose this," she said. "I choose to stay. Not because I have to, but because, despite everything, I feel safer here than I ever did in my father's house." "You shouldn't feel safe with me. I'm not a good man, Eleanor. Good men don't exist. There are just men trying to be better than they were yesterday. Are you trying? Yes? Then that's enough." She turned to leave, paused at the door. "Mary was wrong. You're not dead. Damaged, maybe, but not dead. Dead men don't protect 19-year-old girls they barely know. Dead men don't teach them to shoot or ride or stand up for themselves." "Eleanor, I'm going to bed. Tomorrow I want to learn to use the pistol. The rifle's too unwieldy for close quarters." She left him sitting in the lamplight with his dead wife's photograph and her suicide note, both anchors dragging him down. The next morning brought unexpected visitors. Eleanor was practicing with the Colt .45. Clayton had been right, she was a natural with firearms, when 3 riders approached, not from town but from the north, from the direction of the reservation. Clayton lowered his gun. "That's Joseph Crow Feather. He's a friend." The riders were Native Americans, 2 men and a woman. Joseph, the eldest, had a face carved by wind and wisdom. He dismounted, embraced Clayton like a brother. "It's been too long," Joseph said in perfect English. "It has. Joseph, this is Eleanor, my wife. Eleanor, Joseph and his family have grazing rights on the north section. We share water from Willow Creek." Joseph studied Eleanor with dark, knowing eyes. "You're very young." I'm aware, Eleanor said, not defensive, just factual. The woman, who looked about Eleanor's age, slid off her horse. I'm Sarah. This is my brother Michael. You speak English, Eleanor said, then flushed. I'm sorry, that was rude. Sarah smiled. We went to the mission school. They beat the Cheyenne out of us and poured English in. That's horrible. That's civilization, Sarah said with a shrug that held centuries of resignation. They had come to discuss the water rights. Garrett had been making noise about challenging the long-standing agreement. As the men talked business, Sarah stayed with Eleanor. You're the girl whose father sold her, Sarah said bluntly. Does everyone know? Everyone knows everything out here. It's like the wind. Stories travel whether you want them to or not. And what does everyone say? That you're too young, that Clayton's too old, that Garrett won't give up. Sarah paused. That you're learning to shoot. I am. What? Women need to know how to protect themselves. My grandmother fought against the cavalry, killed 3 soldiers before they got her. How do you stand it? Eleanor asked suddenly. Being seen as less than human? Having no rights? No voice? Sarah's laugh was bitter. You're asking me? My people were forced from our land. Our children stolen for schools. Our men killed for hunting. At least you're seen as human, even if barely. Eleanor felt ashamed. I'm sorry, you're right. I'm not looking for pity, just pointing out that cages come in different shapes. Sarah's expression softened. But I'll tell you what my grandmother told me. The cage doesn't define the bird. The song does. What if you don't know how to sing? Then you learn, or you scream. Either works. That afternoon, after the crow feathers left, a different visitor arrived. Eleanor was in the kitchen helping Rosa with dinner when she heard Clayton's voice sharp with anger. Get out of my house! Eleanor peered around the corner. A woman stood in the doorway, perhaps 30, beautiful in a hard way, with red hair and a dress that cost more than most families saw in a year. Now, Clayton, the woman purred, is that any way to greet an old friend? We were never friends, Lillian. Lillian. Eleanor knew that name. Lillian Garrett, Garrett's wife, or rather, his third wife, the only one who'd survived marriage to him. I heard you got married, Lillian said, pushing past Clayton into the house. To a child, they say, 19 years old. My, following in my husband's footsteps? What do you want? To meet the new Mrs. Hartwell, of course. Lillian's eyes found Eleanor. There you are, dear. Aren't you precious? Like a little doll. Eleanor stepped forward. Mrs. Garrett. Oh, call me Lillian. We're practically sisters, you and I, both married to men who see us as possessions rather than people. My husband doesn't he? Lillian circled Eleanor like a cat. Tell me, does he let you go to town alone? Does he let you have money of your own? Does he touch you like a husband should? Eleanor's face burned. That's not your business. Everything in this county is my husband's business, which makes it mine. Lillian's smile was sharp as glass. He's quite obsessed with you, you know. Says you should have been his. Your husband is wrong about many things. Yes, he is, which is why I'm here. Lillian pulled out an envelope. A warning, woman to woman. My husband plans to have your marriage annulled. He's found a judge in Denver who owes him money. The hearing is in 2 weeks. Clayton took the envelope, read it quickly. His face darkened. This is illegal. So was selling a 19-year-old girl, but here we are. Lillian turned back to Eleanor. You could run. I'd help you. I have connections in San Francisco. People who could give you a new life. Why would you help me? Because I hate my husband. Because I was 17 when he married me. And I know what it's like to be trapped. Lillian's mask slipped for a moment, revealing something raw underneath. Because my best friend was his second wife, and I watched him slowly poison her when she tried to leave. You're saying he murdered her? I'm saying she's dead and he's not, and draw your own conclusions. Lillian moved toward the door. Think about my offer. San Francisco is lovely this time of year, much better than being fought over like a bone between dogs. After she left, Eleanor and Clayton stood in silence. She's right, Eleanor finally said. I could run. You could. Would you stop me? No. Would you come with me? The question surprised them both. Clayton stared at her. I have the ranch. You have land. That's not the same as a life. This is my home. This is your prison. You're as trapped here as I am, just in different ways. Clayton crossed to her, closer than he'd been since the shooting lesson. What are you saying? I'm saying maybe we could both run. Start over somewhere new, somewhere nobody knows our names or our stories. And Garrett would have no power over strangers in a new place. Clayton reached out, almost touched her face, pulled back. You'd want to start over with me? A man nearly 20 years older, damaged by war, haunted by a dead wife. I'd want to start over with the man who gave me a lock for my door, who teaches me to shoot, who stands between me and danger even though I was forced on him. You weren't forced on me. You chose based on lie, but you've kept choosing me every day since. That means something. This time Clayton did touch her face, just his fingertips against her cheek. You're so young, Eleanor. You should have choices, real choices. Then give them to me. How? Eleanor took a breath, made a decision that would change everything. Make the marriage real, not because Garrett forces it, but because we choose it. Then run with me, tonight. Take what we can carry and disappear. Eleanor, I know you don't love me. I know I'm not Mary, but I could be something else. We could be something else. Clayton's hand cupped her face fully now. You don't know what you're asking. I'm asking for freedom, for both of us. And if I said yes, if we ran, what then? Then we write our own story instead of living in the shadow of old ones. Clayton leaned down, and Eleanor thought he might kiss her. Instead, he pressed his forehead against hers, breathing her in. Let me think, he whispered. Give me tonight to think. Eleanor nodded, stepped back. I'll be in my room. My door won't be locked. She climbed the stairs on shaking legs, heart pounding. In her room, she didn't lock the door. Instead, she sat on the bed and waited, listening to the house settle around her. An hour passed, then two. She heard Clayton's footsteps on the stairs, pause outside her door. The handle turned. He stood in the doorway, backlit by the hall lamp. If we do this, there's no going back. I don't want to go back. You're 19, old enough to be sold, old enough to choose. Clayton entered the room, closed the door behind him. I need you to understand something. I can't be gentle like you deserve. The war, it changed me. There are nights I wake up screaming. Days I can barely speak. I'm broken in ways that might hurt you. Eleanor stood, crossed to him. Then we'll be broken together. You don't understand. She kissed him, inexperienced, clumsy, but determined. For a moment, he froze. Then his arms came around her, crushing her against him, and he kissed her back like a drowning man finding air. When they broke apart, both were breathing hard. Are you sure? He asked. I've never been sure of anything in my life, but I'm choosing it anyway. What happened next was gentle, despite his warnings, careful despite the hunger. Clayton treated her like spun glass, like something precious that might shatter. Eleanor had expected pain. The older women always whispered about pain. But there was only awkwardness that gave way to something else, something that made her understand why people risked everything for this connection. Afterward, they lay in the narrow bed, Eleanor's head on Clayton's chest, listening to his heartbeat. We can't run, he said quietly. Why not? Because Garrett would follow, because he has reach everywhere, because running means looking over our shoulders forever. Then what do? We fight, but smart, legal-like. He stroked her hair. There's something I haven't told you. I've been writing to a lawyer in Denver. A real one, not one of Garrett's bought men. He says if the marriage is real, consummated, and if we can prove Garrett's contracts were made under duress, we might have a case. Might isn't very reassuring. It's better than nothing. Eleanor traced the scars on his chest, mapping the geography of old pain. What if we lose? Then we run, but at least we'll have tried to do it right first. A sound from outside made them both tense. Horses, multiple horses. Clayton was out of bed instantly, pulling on trousers, grabbing the pistol from the bedside table. Stay here. But Eleanor was already dressing, hands steady despite her fear. We face things together, remember? They crept to the window. In the moonlight, they could see 5 riders approaching. Not Garrett's men. These riders wore badges. Federal marshals, Clayton breathed. What the hell? They went downstairs together. Clayton opened the door before the marshals could knock. Clayton Hartwell? The lead marshal was young, clean-shaven, all business. Yes, I'm Marshal Foster. We're here about Garrett. What about him? Foster dismounted, pulled out a leather folder. He's been arrested. Federal charges, mail fraud, interstate commerce violations, and suspicion of murder. Eleanor gasped. Murder? His second wife's family hired Pinkerton detectives, found evidence of arsenic poisoning. Same with the first wife. We arrested him an hour ago. What about his contracts? Clayton asked. His claim on my wife? All his assets are frozen pending investigation. Any contracts he held are void until a federal judge reviews them, which could take years. Eleanor's knees nearly buckled with relief. Clayton caught her, held her steady. There's more, Foster said. We need Mrs. Hartwell to testify about the forced marriage, the threats, everything. She'll testify, Clayton said immediately. I can speak for myself, Eleanor said, finding her voice. Yes, I'll testify. Foster nodded. The trial's in 3 weeks in Denver. We'll send someone to escort you. He tipped his hat. Ma'am, Hartwell. The marshals rode off, leaving Eleanor and Clayton standing in the doorway. It's over? Eleanor whispered. Just like that? Not over, but better, much better. They went inside, still stunned. In the lamplight, Eleanor could see marks on Clayton's shoulder, her nail marks from their lovemaking. Evidence of choices made. What happens now? She asked. Now we have 3 weeks to figure out what we are to each other. What do you want us to be? Clayton pulled her close. I want us to be real. Not because we were forced, but because we choose it every day. Even though I'm 19, especially because you're 19, you have so much life ahead of you. I want to be part of it, if you'll have me. Eleanor kissed him, soft this time. Sure, I'll have you. From upstairs came a sound. The wind had blown her bedroom door shut. The lock clicked automatically. I should oil that lock, Clayton said against her lips, so it doesn't stick. Don't you dare, that lock saved me. No, Clayton said, pulling back to look at her. You saved yourself. I just gave you the tools. They stood there in the lamplight, two damaged people choosing to heal together. Outside, snow began to fall, covering the tracks of the marshal's horses, covering the past in clean white silence. In 3 weeks, Eleanor would testify against Garrett. In 6 months, she would be pregnant with their first child. In 10 years, she would be running the ranch alongside Clayton, respected despite her scandalous beginning. But tonight, she was 19 years old, married to a man who'd learned to love her, free from the predator who'd haunted her, and choosing her life for the first time. It was enough, more than enough. It was everything. The train to Denver lurched and swayed, making Eleanor's stomach turn. She pressed her face to the window, watching the Colorado landscape blur past, snow-covered plains giving way to the distant mountains. Clayton sat beside her, his presence solid and reassuring, but she could feel his tension in the way he kept checking his pocket watch. We'll make it in time, she said. It's not the time I'm worried about. Eleanor knew what he meant. 3 weeks had passed since Garrett's arrest. 3 weeks of strange domesticity at the ranch. They'd moved her things to Clayton's room, their room now, and learned each other in ways that went beyond the physical. She'd discovered he hummed when he shaved, that he took his coffee black but liked sugar in his tea, that nightmares still woke him gasping Mary's name. But Denver was Garrett's territory. Even arrested, even facing federal charges, he had influence there. Mrs. Hartwell? A woman's voice made them both turn. A elegant lady in traveling clothes stood in the aisle, her face familiar but not immediately placeable. I'm Catherine Morrison, Dr. Morrison's daughter-in-law. Eleanor relaxed slightly. Of course, from Denver. I heard about your situation, about the trial. Catherine lowered her voice. I wanted to warn you, Garrett has hired Harold Blackwood as his defense attorney. Clayton's jaw tightened. Blackwood's the best lawyer in Colorado. And the most ruthless. He'll try to destroy Eleanor's credibility, paint her as a fortune hunter who entrapped both Garrett and you. Let him try, Eleanor said, surprising herself with her vehemence. Catherine smiled sadly. You're brave, dear, but you're also 19 and female. In that courtroom, those are weaknesses Blackwood will exploit. Then what do you suggest? I suggest you remember that truth isn't always enough. You need to be smarter than him. Catherine pulled out a card. This is my hotel. If you need anything, a friendly face, a safe place, come find me. She moved on, leaving Eleanor and Clayton in troubled silence. Denver rose from the plains like a fever dream of civilization, all brick and ambition. The federal courthouse dominated the center of town, its columns and dome declaring the serious business of justice. Their hotel was modest but clean, 2 blocks from the courthouse. Clayton had wanted something fancier, but Eleanor insisted on not appearing wealthy. We need the jury's sympathy, she said. Rich people don't get sympathy. That first night in Denver, they couldn't sleep. The city sounds were all wrong. Ice were wrong. Carriages instead of coyotes, drunken singing instead of wind. They made love quietly, desperately, like they were storing up sensation against some coming drought. Whatever happens tomorrow, Clayton whispered against her hair, know that these 3 weeks have been the best since Mary died. Only 3 weeks, Eleanor teased, but her heart wasn't in it. 3 weeks of choosing each other. That's worth more than years of obligation. A knock at the door made them both freeze. Clayton reached for the pistol he'd placed on the nightstand. Mr. Hartwell? It's Marshall Foster. Clayton relaxed slightly, pulled on trousers, and opened the door. Foster stood in the hallway with another man, older, beard shot with gray, eyes sharp as winter. This is federal prosecutor James Thornton, Foster said. He needs to speak with Mrs. Hartwell. Now it's past midnight. I apologize for the hour, Thornton said, but there's been a development. They gathered in the small sitting area, Eleanor wrapped in a robe, trying to project dignity despite the circumstances. Garrett's made a new claim, Thornton said without preamble. He says the marriage between you and Mr. Hartwell is fraudulent because you were already promised to him. He has a contract signed by your father. From when I was 15, Eleanor said. My father told me before he died. He was drunk when he signed it. That's helpful, but Garrett also claims... Thornton paused, uncomfortable. He claims you and he were intimate, that you're not... That is, that you weren't innocent when you married Hartwell. Eleanor's face burned. That's a lie. He has a witness, a doctor who supposedly examined you. No doctor ever... Eleanor stopped. Wait, 3 years ago I was ill. Garrett insisted on sending his personal physician. I thought it was kindness. Dr. Hamlin, Thornton said grimly, currently willing to testify to whatever Garrett pays him to say. Clayton's hands clenched into fists. I'll kill him. That won't help your wife, Thornton said sharply. What will help is the truth. Mrs. Hartwell, I need to know everything. Every interaction with Garrett, every witness who might have seen him pressure you or your father. For the next 2 hours, Eleanor talked about the debts that grew mysteriously, about the poisoned well when her father protested Garrett's attention, about the night before her wedding when she heard her father weeping. Thornton took notes, occasionally asking clarifying questions. There's something else, Eleanor said finally. Lily and Garrett visited us. She implied, no, she stated, that Garrett killed his second wife. Thornton's eyes sharpened. Would she testify? I don't know. She seemed to hate him, but she's also his wife. Can she testify against him? In federal court, yes. Spousal privilege doesn't apply to crimes committed before the marriage. Thornton stood. Get some rest. Tomorrow will be difficult. After he left, Eleanor and Clayton sat in silence. I'm scared, Eleanor admitted. So am I. You fought in a war. War's simple, kill or be killed. This, Clayton gestured helplessly, this is words and laws and things I don't understand. We have truth on our side. Sometimes that's not enough. Eleanor took his hand. Then we make it enough. The courthouse was packed the next morning. Word had spread. The Garrett trial was the sensation of Denver. Eleanor recognized faces from Copper Ridge, Mrs. Dalton and her gossip circle, Sheriff Williams, even some of Clayton's fellow veterans. In the back, she spotted Sarah Crowfeather, who nodded solemnly. Garrett sat at the defense table looking confident despite his chains. He'd lost weight in custody, but his suit was immaculate, his smile sharp as ever. When Eleanor entered, his eyes tracked her like a wolf watching prey. Don't look at him, Clayton murmured. He feeds on fear. The judge, Horace Pemberton, according to the nameplate, was 70 if he was a day, with wild white eyebrows and a face carved from granite. This court is now in session, he intoned. The United States versus William Garrett on charges of mail fraud, interstate commerce violations, and murder in the first degree. The trial began with Thornton laying out the government's case. Garrett had systematically defrauded investors across state lines, used the mail system for fraudulent contracts, and was suspected of poisoning two wives for their inheritance. Then Blackwood rose for the defense, and Eleanor understood why everyone feared him. He was handsome in a sharp way, voice smooth as honey over broken glass. Your Honor, Blackwood said, my client is a successful businessman whose only crime was trusting the wrong people, including, he turned to stare at Eleanor, a young woman who played him against another man for her own gain. Objection, Thornton said. Mrs. Hartwell is not on trial. No, but her credibility is central to this case, Blackwood smiled. If she lied about my client, what else has she lied about? The first day was primarily procedural, but Eleanor felt the weight of every stare, heard every whisper. When they broke for lunch, she escaped to the courthouse steps for air. Eleanor? She turned to find Lillian Garrett, dressed in morning black despite her husband being alive. Lillian, how are you holding up? Why do you care? Lillian lit a cigarette, scandalous behavior for a lady. Because I was you once, young, trapped, fighting for my life in a courtroom while men decided my fate. Will you testify? Against my husband? That would ruin me socially. He's ruined you already. Lillian laughed bitterly. True, but there's ruined and there's destroyed. If I testify, I become a pariah. No decent family will receive me. So you'll let him win? I didn't say that. Lillian dropped her cigarette, crushed it under her heel. Check your hotel room tonight, under the mattress. She walked away before Eleanor could respond. The afternoon session was worse. Blackwood called Dr. Hamlin, who testified that he'd examined Eleanor 3 years ago and found evidence of physical maturity inconsistent with innocence. Eleanor wanted to vomit. Clayton's hand found hers under the table, squeezed hard. On cross-examination, Thornton destroyed Hamlin methodically. The doctor couldn't produce any medical records. His story changed twice. Finally, he admitted Garrett had paid for his medical school. So you owed Mr. Garrett everything, Thornton said. I owed him gratitude. Enough gratitude to lie under oath? Objection, Blackwood called. Withdrawn. But Thornton had made his point. That evening, Eleanor checked under the hotel mattress as Lillian had instructed. She found an envelope containing 3 items, a photograph, a letter, and a vial of white powder. The photograph showed Garrett with a young woman Eleanor didn't recognize. The letter was in Garrett's handwriting. My darling Agnes, by the time you read this, you'll be my wife. The arsenic I've been giving you in small doses will ensure you don't live long enough to regret it. Your fortune will comfort me in my grief. Yours in calculation, William. The vial was labeled arsenic, property of W. Garrett. Jesus Christ, Clayton breathed. He documented his own crime. He's that arrogant, Eleanor said. He never thought anyone would find it. How did Lillian get this? I don't know and I don't care. We need to get this to Thornton. They found the prosecutor in his office, still working by lamplight. His eyes widened as he examined the evidence. This changes everything, he said. But we need to verify authenticity. If Blackwood can prove these are forgeries, they're not, a voice said from the doorway. Lillian entered, looking tired but determined. I took them from William's private safe. I've been collecting evidence for years, waiting for the right moment. Why now? Thornton asked. Because Eleanor reminded me what courage looks like. A 19-year-old girl standing up to him when I, a grown woman, have been too afraid. Lillian straightened. I'll testify, publicly. Let society damn me. I'm already damned staying married to him. The next morning, the courtroom buzzed when Lillian took the stand. Garrett's face went white, then red with rage. You bitch, he shouted. You're my wife. Silence, Judge Pemberton thundered. One more outburst and you'll be gagged. Lillian testified calmly, devastating in her precision. She told of finding evidence of his crimes, of watching him slowly poison his second wife, Of living in fear for 5 years. Why didn't you leave? Thornton asked gently. Where would I go? I have no money of my own. He controls everything. No family. He isolated me from them. And I knew what happened to wives who disappointed him. Then Blackwood cross-examined, and he was vicious. Isn't it true you're having an affair? Lillian blinked. No. Isn't it true you've been planning to divorce my client and needed evidence to secure a favorable settlement? No. Isn't it true you're in love with Clayton Hartwell? The courtroom gasped. Eleanor's blood turned to ice. That's absurd, Lillian said, but there was a tremor in her voice. Blackwood produced a letter. This is your handwriting, is it not? A letter to a friend describing Clayton Hartwell as, quote, the only real man in this godforsaken county. That's taken out of context. Context or not, you admired him, perhaps enough to help frame your husband so the woman he married would be free. Objection, Thornton shouted. Speculation. Sustained. But the damage was done. The jury looked skeptical now, wondering about conspiracies and motivations. That afternoon, Eleanor was called to testify. Walking to the stand felt like walking to a gallows. Garrett's eyes followed her, promising retribution. Thornton led her through her story carefully. Her father's debts, the forced marriage, Garrett's threats and pursuit. She spoke clearly, fighting to keep emotion from her voice. Then came Blackwood's cross-examination. Mrs. Hartwell, or should I say Miss Wade, since the validity of your marriage is in question, how old are you? 19. Young enough to be Mr. Hartwell's daughter. Age gaps in marriage aren't unusual in frontier communities. But you didn't want to marry him, did you? Not at first. So you were forced? Yes. By whom? Eleanor hesitated. By circumstances. Not by Mr. Hartwell himself? No. In fact, he's been nothing but kind to you? Yes. Given you freedom, protection, even teaching you to shoot? Yes. So this man you were forced to marry has treated you well, while Mr. Garrett, who offered to save your father from ruin, is somehow the villain? Garrett didn't offer to save anyone. He created the ruin in the first place. Do you have proof of that? Eleanor thought of the poisoned well, the inflated debts, all the small cruelties. No written proof. So we have only your word, the word of a 19-year-old girl who benefited greatly from her marriage to a wealthy rancher. I didn't want wealth. No, then why not simply run away? You could have left any time before the wedding. And gone where? With what money? To what life? Other women manage. Other women aren't 19 with a drunk father and debts hanging over their heads. Other women also don't end up married to one of the richest ranchers in Colorado. Eleanor's temper flared. You think I wanted this? You think any woman wants to be sold like cattle, fought over like property? I wanted to choose my own life. And yet here you are, having chosen to stay with Mr. Hartwell, having chosen to share his bed. Objection, Thornton roared. Irrelevant and improper. Sustained. Mr. Blackwood, you will refrain from such implications. But again, damage done. Eleanor left the stand feeling dirty, exposed. Eleanor's body shook, not with tears but with rage that needed release. She grabbed a pillow, pressed it to her face, and screamed until her throat was raw. Clayton held her through it, understanding this wasn't grief but fury, finally finding voice. I failed, she sobbed. He made me look like a gold digger. No, you told the truth. That matters. Does it? You saw the jury. They think I'm just another scheming woman. Clayton tilted her chin up. I don't care what they think. I know who you are. Who am I? The bravest person I've ever met. And you're not even 20 yet. A knock interrupted them. Marshall Foster stood at the door with an elderly woman Eleanor didn't recognize. This is Agnes Morrison, Foster said, Garrett's second wife. Eleanor gasped. But she's dead. Agnes smiled grimly, pulling back her sleeve to reveal arms scarred with arsenic burns. That's what he wanted everyone to think. Dr. Morrison, no relation, helped fake my death certificate. I've been living as Anna Mills in California for 8 years, working as a seamstress. These scars, she traced the marks, match the arsenic residue the Pinkertons found in my supposed grave. They exhumed an empty coffin filled with rocks. But when I heard about the trial, I knew it was time. She was thin, frail, but her eyes burned with purpose. I survived the poisoning because I suspected what he was doing. I switched my tea with his when he wasn't looking. Then I fled. Let everyone think I died. Will you testify? Clayton asked. Tomorrow. I'm old. Probably dying anyway from the damage the poison did. But I'll live long enough to see him hang. The courtroom erupted when Agnes Morrison walked in the next morning. Garrett shot to his feet, face purple with rage. "You're dead," he screamed. "I killed you!" The confession echoed in the suddenly silent room. Even Blackwood looked stunned. Judge Pemberton's gavel cracked like gunshot. "Mr. Garrett, you've just confessed to murder in open court." "She's supposed to be dead. I put enough arsenic in her tea to kill a horse." "Bailiff, gag the defendant." As they wrestled Garrett into submission, Agnes took the stand. Her testimony was devastating. She detailed months of slowly increasing illness. Finding arsenic hidden in Garrett's study, the night she switched their cups and watched him suffer his own poison. "I'm not proud of running," she said, "but I was 23 and terrified. He'd already killed one wife. I knew I was next." Blackwood, for once, seemed at a loss. His cross-examination was perfunctory, defeated. Then Thornton recalled Eleanor for redirect. "Mrs. Hartwell," he said gently, "you've been asked why you didn't run. But I want to ask something different. Why did you stay?" Eleanor looked at Clayton, then at the jury. "Because for the first time in my life, someone gave me a choice. Miss Hartwell, Clayton, could have treated me as property. Instead, he gave me a locked door, taught me to defend myself, and waited for me to choose him. I stayed because he showed me what respect looked like." And Garrett? Garrett sees women as things to be owned, used, and discarded when they were no longer useful. He would have killed me eventually, just like the others. "Objection," Blackwood called weakly. "Overruled. The defendant's own confession makes such speculation relevant." The jury deliberated for exactly 47 minutes. Eleanor counted every one. "We find the defendant guilty on all counts," the foreman announced, "and we recommend the maximum sentence." Judge Pemberton nodded gravely. "William Garrett, you are sentenced to death by hanging for the murder of Martha Garrett, attempted murder of Agnes Morrison, and conspiracy to commit fraud. Sentenced to be carried out within 30 days. Garrett screamed obscenities as they dragged him away. His last words, shouted at Eleanor, were, "You're still mine. The contract makes you mine." "Actually," Judge Pemberton said, "I'm ruling here and now that any contracts regarding Mrs. Hartwell are null and void, having been made under duress and with criminal intent. Your marriage to Mr. Hartwell is legally valid and binding." Eleanor's knees buckled. Clayton caught her, held her as she sobbed. Relief, exhaustion, freedom all mixed together. Outside the courthouse, snow was falling. Clean, white, covering all the ugliness with pristine silence. Lillian Garrett, soon to be Lillian something else, hugged Eleanor briefly. "Thank you," she whispered, "for reminding me how to be brave." Agnes Morrison, leaning heavily on Marshall Foster's arm, smiled at Eleanor. "Live well, child. It's the best revenge against men like him." Sarah Crow Feather appeared from the crowd. "The bird found her song," she said simply, then disappeared into the swirling snow. On the train home, Eleanor and Clayton sat in comfortable silence, watching the landscape roll past. She was still 19, still married to a man old enough to be her father, still bearing the weight of her story. But she was free, truly free. The contract that had bound her was void, but the choice she'd made was real. "What now?" she asked Clayton. "Now we go home. We run the ranch. We live. Together, for as long as you'll have me." Eleanor took his hand, scarred from war and work, gentle despite its strength. "That might be a very long time. I'm counting on it." As the train carried them back to Copper Ridge, back to the ranch that was now truly home, Eleanor thought about the girl who'd counted floorboards in a church, planning her escape. That girl was gone, replaced by a woman who'd faced down a predator in court, who'd chosen her own path. She was 19 years old, and her life was finally beginning. The ranch looked different, covered in February snow, softer somehow, like the earth itself had decided to grant them peace after the storm of the trial. February dawn painted the mountains pink while she huddled in Clayton's oversized coat, claiming this moment of peace before the world woke paint the mountains pink and gold. 6 weeks had passed since Denver, 6 weeks of learning what normal meant for them. "You'll catch your death," Clayton said from behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist. She leaned back into his warmth. Worth it for this view. The mountains? The freedom. They stood in comfortable silence, breathing steam in the cold air. Then Eleanor felt it, a flutter in her belly, like butterfly wings. "Clayton? Hmm. I think I'm pregnant." His arms tightened around her. "Are you sure?" "Rosa says I have the look, and I haven't bled in 2 months." Clayton turned her to face him, his gray eyes searching hers. "How do you feel about it?" "Terrified, happy, young." She laughed shakily. "I'm going to be a mother at 19. 20 by the time the baby comes." "Still young. Your mother had you at 18. Eleanor considered this. "That's different." "How?" "She chose my father, loved him before he became what he was." Clayton's hands framed her face. "And you? Do you choose me now? Love me now?" The word hung between them, unspoken these past months. They'd shared a bed, shared their bodies, shared their fears, but never said the word that might make it all real. "I choose you," Eleanor said carefully. "Every day I choose you. As for love," she took a breath, "I don't know what love looks like. I thought my parents loved each other, but look how that ended. I know you loved Mary." "I did. I do. I'll always love Mary." Clayton's honesty stung, but Eleanor appreciated it. "But that doesn't mean I can't love again. Differently, maybe. Better, possibly." "Do you love me?" "I'm learning to, each day a little more. Is that enough?" Eleanor considered. "It's honest. That's worth more than pretty lies." A rider approaching broke the moment. Not one rider, 3. Eleanor tensed until she recognized Sheriff Williams, but the 2 men with him were strangers. "Morning, Clayton, Mrs. Hartwell." Williams dismounted, looking uncomfortable. "These gentlemen are from the territorial government. They have business with you." The older stranger, distinguished in an expensive suit despite the rough ride, stepped forward. "Mr. Hartwell, I'm James Patterson from the governor's office. This is Mr. Charles Whitman from the land registry." "What's this about?" Clayton's voice carried an edge of suspicion. "May we speak inside? What we have to discuss is significant." They gathered in Clayton's study, Eleanor serving coffee with steady hands despite her nerves. Patterson pulled out a leather folder thick with documents. "Mr. Hartwell, are you aware that William Garrett owned considerable land holdings throughout the county?" "I knew he had property. 4,000 acres to be precise, plus mineral rights, water rights, and several businesses in town." Patterson paused. "As you know, Garrett exhausted all appeals and was executed 6 months ago. The territorial governor denied clemency last month, and the federal court upheld the sentence. It took longer than expected, but justice was served." Eleanor shuddered. They'd heard about the hanging, though neither had attended. "What does this have to do with us?" Clayton asked. "Garrett died without legitimate heirs. His wife Lillian filed for divorce before his execution and renounced any claim to his estate. His previous wives are deceased, or were thought to be." Patterson smiled slightly. "Agnes Morrison has also renounced any claim, saying she wants nothing of his blood money." "So the territory claims it all?" "Normally, yes, but there's a complication." Whitman spoke for the first time. "Garrett left a will, written the night before his execution, properly witnessed by 2 federal marshals." "Let me guess," Clayton said dryly. "He left everything to charity out of the goodness of his heart." "Not exactly." Patterson pulled out a document. "He left everything to Eleanor Hartwell." Eleanor's coffee cup shattered on the floor. "What?" Clayton was on his feet. "That's insane. He hated her. He tried to destroy her." "The will is unusual," Patterson admitted. "Shall I read the relevant section?" At their numb nods, he began. "To Eleanor Wade Hartwell, the girl I could not possess, I leave my entire estate, not as a gift, but as a curse. 4,000 acres watered with blood, businesses built on broken backs, wealth gathered through suffering. May it weigh on you as you weighed on me. May you never know peace, wondering whose lives paid for your comfort. You were the only thing I wanted that I couldn't buy, steal, or destroy. In death, I ensure you'll never forget me." Silence filled the study. Rosa appeared to clean up the broken cup, took one look at their faces and retreated. "I don't want it," Eleanor said flatly. "Any of it." "You can refuse the inheritance," Whitman said. "In which case, it reverts to the territory." "Good, I refuse." "Wait," Clayton held up a hand. "Think about this, Eleanor." "There's nothing to think about. I won't take anything from him and 4,000 acres. Water rights that control half the county. The bank that holds mortgages on dozens of families' homes." Clayton turned to Patterson. "What happens to those mortgages if the territory takes over?" Patterson's expression was grim. "They'll be called in. The territory needs revenue." "How many families?" Eleanor asked quietly. 43 mortgages on homesteads, another dozen on businesses in town." Eleanor closed her eyes. 43 families who could lose their homes. "If I accept the inheritance, I control those mortgages?" "Completely. I could forgive them? The debts?" Patterson blinked. "That would be financially inadvisable. We're talking about nearly $200,000 in assets." "That's not what I asked." "Yes, you could forgive them. You could do whatever you wanted with the properties." Eleanor looked at Clayton. "What do you think?" "I think Garrett wanted to curse you, but maybe you can turn his curse into a blessing for others. Or maybe that's what he wanted, to tie me to him forever through his wealth. Only if you let it tie you." Clayton took her hands. "You're not responsible for how he got his wealth, but you could be responsible for how it's used now." Eleanor stood, paced to the window. The ranch spread before her, peaceful in the morning light. Somewhere out there were 43 families sleeping easier not knowing their mortgages might be called. "If I accept," she said slowly, "I want conditions." "Such as?" Patterson asked. "First, I want to review every mortgage. Any that were fraudulent or predatory get forgiven immediately. Second, I want half the land given to the Cheyenne and Arapaho tribes. It was stolen from them anyway. Third, I want Garrett's house in town turned into a school for girls." Whitman was scribbling frantically. That's millions of dollars you're giving away." "It was never mine to begin with." Eleanor turned to face them. "And there's one more condition. I want it all put in trust, managed jointly by Clayton and myself, with oversight from a board that includes Joseph Crowfeather, Dr. Morrison, and Mrs. Porter." "Why those three?" Patterson asked. "Because they're the only people in this county who never bowed to Garrett." Patterson and Whitman exchanged glances. "We'll need to draft the paperwork. It could take weeks." "Then draft it, but I want one thing done immediately." Eleanor moved to Clayton's desk, pulled out paper and ink. "I'm writing a public notice for the newspaper. Every family with a mortgage from Garrett's bank has 6 months to prove predatory lending. If they can, their debt is forgiven." "You'll bankrupt the estate," Whitman protested. "Then so be it." Eleanor signed the notice with a flourish. "Publish this tomorrow, or I refuse everything and let the territory deal with the mess." After the men left, Eleanor collapsed in Clayton's chair, suddenly exhausted. "You know what you've done?" Clayton asked. "You've made yourself the most powerful person in the county, and the biggest target. I know. People will come wanting favors, wanting money, wanting pieces of what you've inherited. I know. Are you ready for that?" Eleanor looked at him, this man who'd protected her, taught her, loved her in his broken way. "I wasn't ready to be sold at 19. Wasn't ready to be fought over like property. But I survived that. I'll survive this too." That night they made love with desperate tenderness, aware that everything was about to change. Eleanor traced the scars on Clayton's body, memorizing the geography of his pain. "Are you angry?" she asked. "That I'll have more money than you?" "No, maybe a little scared." "Of what?" "That you won't need me anymore." Eleanor straddled him, looked down at his weathered face. "I never needed you, Clayton. That's not why I stayed. I stayed because I wanted you. There's a difference. And now, when you could buy your own ranch, your own life, now I want to wake up next to you, raise our child together, fight about fence lines and cattle prices and whether to plant wheat or corn." She kissed him deeply. "Money doesn't change that." "Promise?" "I promise, Vatis." The announcement in the newspaper caused an immediate uproar. Within 3 days, 20 families had lined up at the bank claiming predatory lending. Eleanor, with Clayton and a lawyer from Denver, reviewed each claim. Most were legitimate, interest rates that doubled overnight, fees that appeared from nowhere, threatened foreclosures despite payments made. She forgave 18 mortgages in the first week. "You're going to be poor before you're 21, the Denver lawyer warned. "Better poor than complicit," Eleanor replied. But not everyone was grateful. Some of the wealthier ranchers who'd benefited from Garrett's schemes saw Eleanor as a threat. Mysterious accidents began happening. Fences cut, water diverted, dead animals left at the gate. "They're trying to scare you," Clayton said, loading his rifle. "It's working," Eleanor admitted. "I'm scared all the time now." "Good. Fear keeps you careful. It's when you stop being scared that you get careless." The next morning brought unexpected visitors. Lillian Garrett, now calling herself Lillian Foster, arrived with Agnes Morrison and, surprisingly, Catherine Morrison. "We've come with a proposition," Lillian announced. Eleanor, nauseous from morning sickness, tried to focus. "What kind of proposition?" "Agnes and I have been talking. We want to help you." "Wait, because you're 19 years old, pregnant, and trying to remake the entire county's economy while half the powerful men want you dead," Agnes said bluntly. "You need allies." Catherine pulled out a folder. "I'm a trained bookkeeper. My husband thinks I just help with his medical records, but I've been managing investments for years. I've reviewed the Garrett holdings. You're not going bankrupt. If managed properly, even after your generous forgiveness program, the remaining assets could generate substantial income." "Income I don't want." "Income you could use for good," Lillian corrected. "Build that school, fund a hospital, create a scholarship for girls to attend university." Eleanor looked at these women, Garrett's widow, his supposedly dead wife, and the doctor's educated daughter-in-law. "Why do you care?" "Because we all know what it's like to be trapped," Agnes said. "You have a chance to make sure other girls aren't. Don't waste it on pride." They spent the afternoon planning. By evening, they had outlined a structure for the Garrett estate that would fund education and health care for the county while maintaining enough revenue to be sustainable. "There's just one problem," Catherine said. "The men on the territorial board won't approve this. Too progressive." "Then we don't ask for approval," Eleanor said. "We just do it." "That's not how the law works." "The law sold me to Clayton. The law let Garrett murder 2 wives before anyone cared. Maybe it's time to stop waiting for the law to catch up to what's right." Clayton, who'd been silent throughout the meeting, finally spoke. "She's right, but if you do this, you're declaring war on the established order." "They declared war on me when I was 15, and Garrett started circling," Eleanor replied. "I'm just finally fighting back." That night, as they prepared for bed, Clayton pulled out a document Eleanor hadn't seen before. "What's this?" "A deed transfer. I'm giving you 200 acres. Eleanor stared at him. "What? Why, Ma?" "Because when we married, you had nothing. No choices, no freedom, no future except what I allowed." He handed her the papers. "This makes you a landowner in your own right, separate from the Garrett inheritance, separate from me. If something happens to me, or if you decide you want to leave, you'll have something that's purely yours." "Clayton," Eleanor's eyes filled with tears, "this is worth a fortune." "You're worth more." She threw herself into his arms, sobbing. "I don't want to leave, ever." "I know, but knowing you could and choosing not to, that's what makes it real." They made love urgently, Eleanor's growing belly pressed between them, new life insisting on its presence. Afterward, as Clayton slept, her reflection in the window overlaid the landscape, ghost girl becoming landowner, frightened bride transforming into power her own 200 acres to the north, the Hartwell Ranch spreading in all other directions, and beyond that, the 4,000 acres of blood-soaked Garrett land she now controlled. Tomorrow she would meet with the tribal council about returning stolen land. Next week she would break ground on the girls' school. Next month she would give birth to Clayton's child. She was not quite 20 years old, and she held the economic future of the county in her hands. A sound from outside made her tense, horses approaching fast. Clayton was instantly awake, reaching for his gun. "Stay here," he ordered. But Eleanor was already dressing, checking the load on the pistol he'd taught her to use. "We face things together, remember?" They crept downstairs. Through the window, they could see torches, a dozen riders, faces masked. "Eleanor Hartwell," a voice shouted, "you've stolen what belongs to us." "Nothing of Garrett's belongs to you," Eleanor shouted back. "His wealth should go to established families, not some jumped-up child who's spread her legs for protection." Clayton started for the door, but Eleanor stopped him. "This is my fight." She walked onto the porch, pistol visible but not raised. "I see 12 cowards who hide their faces. If you have grievances, come in daylight like men. Men don't negotiate with whores." The word hung in the cold air. Eleanor raised her pistol, fired. The torch in the speaker's hand exploded, making his horse rear. "The next shot goes in someone's skull," she said calmly. "I'm 19, pregnant, and have already killed one man's legacy. Don't test whether I'll kill more. You can't shoot all of us." "No, but I can shoot 3 of you before you get to the porch, and my husband can shoot 3 more. 6 dead men is a high price for pride." Silas and Miguel emerged from the barn, rifles ready. Rosa appeared in an upstairs window with Clayton's hunting rifle. "Seems you're outnumbered," Clayton said mildly. The riders milled uncertainly. Then from the darkness came the sound of more horses. Joseph Crowfeather and 15 Cheyenne warriors rode into the torchlight. "We heard there was trouble," Joseph said. "Came to check on our friends." The masked riders looked around, suddenly aware they were surrounded. "This isn't over," the leader snarled. "Yes, it is," Eleanor said. "Tomorrow I'm publishing the names of everyone who owes money to the Garrett estate. Every debt, every dirty deal, every bribe paid, unless you all ride away now and never come back." "You don't know who we are," Eleanor smiled coldly. "Mr. Davidson, your horse has a distinctive white sock on the left rear leg. Mr. Campbell, you're wearing the same boots you wear to church. Mr. Harrison, your wife embroidered that shirt. I recognize her stitching." She'd been guessing on the last 2, but the way the men shifted confirmed her suspicions. "Leave now and your secrets stay secret. Come back and I'll destroy you with paperwork instead of bullets." One by one, the riders wheeled their horses and fled. Joseph's warriors followed them to ensure they kept going. "You've made enemies tonight," Joseph warned. "I've had enemies since I was 15, Eleanor replied. "At least now I can fight back." Joseph studied her with those ancient eyes. "You're not the frightened girl who came here in November. No, that girl is dead. Garrett killed her, the trial buried her, and tonight," Eleanor looked at Clayton, then at her allies gathered in defense of her. "Tonight, someone new was born." As everyone dispersed, Clayton and Eleanor stood on the porch watching the sunrise. The same sunrise she'd watched that morning. But everything had changed. "Are you all right?" Clayton asked. Eleanor said wonderingly, "I've lived more in these months than most live in decades. Been sold, bought, married, tried in court, made wealthy, and threatened with death. I'm carrying the child of a man who loved his dead wife and is learning to love me. I own land, control mortgages, and have plans to change this entire county. That's not what I asked." Eleanor turned to him, smiled. "Despite my youth, I'm more than all right. I'm free. I'm powerful. I'm choosing my life every single day. Even the hard parts. Especially the hard parts." She took his hand, placed it on her growing belly. "We're building something here, Clayton. Not just a family, but a future where girls like I was have choices. That's ambitious for someone not yet 20. I've got time." They went inside as the morning warmed. Eleanor had ledgers to review, letters to write, a county to reshape. But first, breakfast with her husband, their child growing between them, in the house that was truly home now. Later, she would stand in the study looking at the deed Clayton had given her. 200 acres in her name alone. Not payment for being his wife, not compensation for her youth stolen, but recognition of her worth as herself. She thought of that frightened girl counting floorboards in a church, planning escape routes she'd never take. That girl hadn't known that sometimes the cage door opens not through escape, but through transformation. That sometimes the thing that traps you becomes the thing that frees you, if you're brave enough to seize control of the narrative. Eleanor Hartwell, 19 years old, pregnant, wealthy, feared, and respected in equal measure, stood at the window of her study, Hers now, Clayton had insisted, and looked out at the empire built on blood that she would transform into something built on hope. The baby kicked, strong and insistent. Clayton's child, but also hers. A child who would grow up with choices, with freedom, with a mother who'd fought for both. Your mother was 19 when her life truly began, Eleanor whispered to her belly. 19 when she stopped being property and started being powerful. Remember that, little one? Remember that we're never too young to change the world. Outside, spring was coming early to Colorado, ice melting into water that would feed the earth. Eleanor had plans for that earth, crops that would feed families, schools that would educate girls, businesses that would employ women. She was 19 years old, and she was just getting started. Clayton found her there an hour later, surrounded by papers and plans, pencil behind her ear, looking like what she was, a force of nature disguised as a teenage bride. Regrets? He asked. Never, Estienner said, and meant it. I was sold at 19, but I bought my freedom with courage I didn't know I had. That's a bargain I'd make again. Even knowing everything, the pain, the fear, the weight of all this responsibility. Eleanor stood, crossed to him, kissed him deeply, especially knowing everything, because this led me to you, to this life, to this chance to matter. You always mattered. No, I existed, now I matter. There's a difference. As the sun climbed higher, bathing the study in golden light, Eleanor returned to her work. Letters to write, plans to make, a future to build. She was 19 years old, married to a man learning to love her, carrying his child, holding the power to reshape a county's destiny. It wasn't the life she'd planned. It was better. It was chosen. It was hers. And she was just getting started. The same 12 floorboards stretched before her, but now she stood as speaker, not sacrifice. But this time she stood as a speaker, not a bride. The church was packed for the graduation ceremony of the first class from the Garrett Hartwell School for Girls. She was 29 now, mother of 3, owner of the largest ranch in the county, and the woman who transformed Copper Ridge from a town built on exploitation to one built on opportunity. 10 years ago, she began, looking out at the 12 young women graduating, I stood in this church, 19 years old, counting the boards between me and the door. I thought freedom meant running away. I've learned since then that sometimes freedom means standing your ground and changing the world around you instead of fleeing it. In the front row, Clayton sat with their children, Thomas, age 9, Mary, 7, and little Sarah, 4. His hair was more gray than brown now, but his eyes still watched her with that mixture of pride and love he'd learned to show over the years. Each of you has been told you're too young, too female, too poor, too something to achieve your dreams, Eleanor continued. I'm here to tell you that being young and female and poor taught me to fight harder than any advantage could have. You are not too anything. You are exactly enough. After the ceremony, as families celebrated and girls compared their plans for university, funded by the estate Eleanor managed, Mrs. Porter, now 82, approached. You did it, girl, she said. You took the worst thing that happened to you and transformed it into this. I had help. We all do. The trick is recognizing it and accepting it. That evening, Eleanor and Clayton walked through the cemetery. They stopped at 3 graves, Thomas Wade, Mary Hartwell, and a new stone, William Garrett's, which Eleanor had insisted on marking properly despite everything. Why buy? Clayton had asked when she'd ordered the stone. Because hating the dead gives them power over the living, she'd replied. I'd rather forgive and forget than carry that poison forever. Now, standing before the graves, Eleanor felt the weight of all those lives lost and transformed. Any regrets? Clayton asked, echoing his question from a decade ago. One, Eleanor said. What? I wish I could tell that 19-year-old girl in the wedding dress that it would be all right, more than all right, that being sold would lead to being free. That being owned would teach her to own herself. Would she have believed you? No, she had to live it to believe it. They walked home as the sun set, their children running ahead, laughing. The ranch spread before them, prosperous and peaceful. The girls' school stood on the hill where Garrett's mansion once loomed. The hospital bore Agnes Morrison's name. The library was dedicated to Mary Hartwell. That night, as they prepared for bed in the room they'd shared for a decade, Clayton pulled out a worn piece of paper. "What's that?" Eleanor asked. "The deed to your original 200 acres, plus papers for another 100 I want to add to it." "Clayton, 300 acres is too much. It's been 10 years. Your work has tripled the value of this ranch. You've earned every acre." "Clayton, you've already given me everyone." "No, you've earned everything. There's a difference." Eleanor took the deed, then set it aside. "I don't need more land. I need you to promise me something." "What?" "If I die first, remarry. Find someone young and spirited who'll drive you crazy and keep you alive. Listener, promise me, don't become what you were when I met you, a ghost haunting his own life. I promise if you promise the same." "Clayton, if you die first, I'll mourn you properly. Then I'll take lovers half my age and scandalize the entire county." He laughed, pulled her close. "That's my girl." "Woman," she corrected. "I haven't been a girl since I was 19 years old in a borrowed wedding dress, counting floorboards." "What are you now?" Eleanor considered. "Free, powerful, chosen. Yours, but my own first." "That's a lot for one person to be." "I started early. I had time to grow into it." As they made love with the comfortable passion of a decade together, Eleanor thought about time and transformation. She'd been sold at 19, but that sale had been the chrysalis, not the cage. Everything that followed, the fear, the trial, the inheritance, the battles, the victories, had been her emergence. Later, as Clayton slept, Eleanor stood at the window where she'd stood that first night, terrified and alone. The same mountains rose in the distance. The same stars wheeled overhead. But everything else had changed, most of all her. She was 29 years old. In another decade, she'd be 39, then 49 if she was lucky. The girl who'd counted floorboards would become a grandmother, maybe a widow, certainly a force that would shape the county for generations. But she would always be, in some essential way, that 19-year-old bride who chose to stay instead of run, who chose to transform instead of escape, who chose to turn a curse into a blessing. "Thank you," she whispered to that long-ago girl, "for being brave when you didn't feel brave, for staying when you wanted to run, for becoming me." The wind answered with silence, but Eleanor heard agreement in it anyway. Or maybe that was just Clayton's breathing, steady and sure, the rhythm of a life chosen and rechosen every single day. She returned to bed, curved her body around her husband's, and slept the sleep of someone who'd earned their peace the hardest way possible, by fighting for it, claiming it, and refusing to let it go. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. The bank needed managing, the school needed funding, the children needed raising, the ranch needed running. But tonight, Eleanor Wade Hartwell, who'd been a purchased bride at 19 and became a powerful woman by 20, slept peacefully in the arms of a man who'd learned to love her, in a house that had become a home, on land that bore her name. She was 29 years old, and her life, her real, chosen, fought-for life, was still just beginning.